Do y'all remember Chuck Norris? I got my gym membership again like a week ago. Chuck Norris was, a true patriot. A real American hero. He sincerely was the father of something, I'm sure. But I was just reminiscing today about a former time. If you know who Chuck Norris is, kudos to you. You have been around the block, to put it lightly. But in my reminiscence, I was reminded of the phenomenon of Chuck Norris memes. I promise this is relevant. Now, for my younger audience out there, the Gen Alphas of the world, the younger people, do you count as people yet? Chuck Norris was like the OG tough guy. To give an example of how old these memes are, this is what the iPhone call screen looked like when these memes were popular. And to be fair, if you look at the Chuck Norris memes that are still out there today, some of them are, they're kind of funny. But in my endless reminiscence, because I just be pondering, I remembered today a meme from way back when my homeschooled self would Google Chuck Norris memes and click on the images tab. And there was this one that I saw. It was like the manly, ooh, when Chuck Norris pokes you on Facebook. Do you remember poking on Facebook? You are so old. But anyway, it was like the manly, when Chuck Norris pokes you on Facebook, and it was a picture of some dude with a bullet hole in his arm. It was actually really funny. It's not as dark as you think. And this, my friends, is where I tie it all together. Because today, we're talking about poking holes in music. Okay, so what on earth am I even talking about poking holes in music? What does that mean? Essentially, it's just the idea of creating a wall of sound, whatever that be, whether it be in part writing or in your guitars and drums and whatever. You have a wall of sound and you poke holes in it. You take little parts out. And basically, the effect of that is a more intricate pattern or intricate layers. And it makes it more interesting than just the wall of sound. So I'm going to give two examples of this, and they're a little bit different. Actually, they're very different. But one of them is going to be a string quartet that I wrote 4 years ago. And the other one is going to be a song that I basically just wrote the riff to, and that's it. So here we are in the string quartet. This is the third movement, and it's the middle section because this is where I actually employed the use of poking holes. Now, as opposed to last week where I had really nice playback and it was beautiful and smooth, it's not going to be that way this week because you need the definition of the choppy old sounds so that you can hear where the holes are actually happening. So here's where I did it. Okay, the melody there is in the cello. And if you play the cello and the violas together, you actually get a little harmony. It's a little hard to hear because the violas are quieter, but it's there. So let's take a look at what I actually did here. So the best way to compare this to what it could have been would just be expect just eighth notes all the way through. I took the liberty of editing that real quick, so this is what that would sound like. Now, obviously, there's still some 16th notes in there, but I just left those in because, like I said earlier, you have the violas and the cellos working together. So even if I had just had the straight eighth notes, I would have had these 16ths interspersed as well. But compare that to the original version where it actually does have the holes poked in it. It's much more interesting. And so altogether, it actually creates a very nice background for the melody and little obligato stuff on top. So that's the main thing I'm getting at here. The easiest takeaway from this is just create your wall of sound, which actually, when I was writing this, That's what I did. I created the wall of sound and I poked holes in it. I took notes out where I thought it would sound good, where it would kind of syncopate it, you know? So create your wall of sound and poke holes in it. But there's more here. Remember those 16ths from earlier? These notes right here are very important because what they do is add a little bit more texture. If I just had the single eighth notes here, it still wouldn't be as interesting. As opposed to so while those 16ths are not poking holes, they are, in a sense, the same idea. Because you're taking your wall of sound and you're chopping it up in some way. And not to get political or anything, but creating the wall first is actually a lot easier. Alright, so next example is completely different, but interestingly, it actually is classically inspired, but this is a totally different type of project. However, some of the same principles still do apply. So for instance, let's check out the guitars here, because you have your wall of sound, but on every 2 and 4 you're dropping out. And so the purpose of this is twofold. One, you're poking holes, so it gives it space to breathe. Also, you're following the drums. Now just listen here for a second, because having the drums follow what the guitars are doing is so important. And I can tell you as a drummer that that is one of the most important things you could ever do when writing a drum part, is follow the phrasing of your other parts, whether that be the vocals or the guitars or the keys or whatever it is. Follow that phrasing. But that aside, the rhythm of the guitars and bass is bum 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 doo 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 doo, right? So you have that in the bass drum. And then when there is space in the guitars, dun 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 ah, right? That's the space, the ah right there. So on the space, you have the snare drum going. Put that together. Okay, so then when you mix the guitars and the drums together, you have the drums following the guitars leaving space for the drums, and it's this constant driving forward motion. And so there's something happening all throughout the wall, but within the wall there are little cracks, there are little parts being pulled out, and it makes it much more interesting than just dun 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 dun, right? It makes it much more intricate. And then, of course, on top of that, you have the organ, which the organ is like its own little wall. So that is filling in the background of the other wall, which is doing the intricate stuff. So you put it all together. And its own little symphonic mess. So don't forget, the reason I'm making these videos is to point out just little things that you can do to make your mediocre song a little less mediocre, right? Because this is about excellence. So once you write your song, reevaluate it and see what you can do to it. See if you can poke holes to make it more interesting. This also is a great way to keep you from just rattling your brain trying to make it more interesting from the start. Just write it simple from the start and then poke holes in it. So there you go. Don't forget about excellence and put the effort into your music that it deserves.